You're listening to the Keep Optimizing podcast to increase your traffic, improve your conversion rates, and grow your profits.
Hello and welcome. If you're looking to improve the performance and return on investment of your marketing, then you are in the right place. I'm Chloe Thomas, the host of this marketing focused podcast, and it's very, very cool to have you tuning in. Now, it's a new month, so that means a new topic, and December is all about content marketing. We've got 5 content marketing episodes coming up for you, and in those we're going to be diving into both what you can do on your own site and the content marketing you can do elsewhere. That's going to include PR, outreach, so guest blogging, guesting on podcasts, working out who you should be talking to and building relationships with. We're going to be getting into user-generated content, blogging, imagery, and of course the overall content strategy too. Throughout these episodes, there are great ideas for businesses, both large and small, because content is one of those things which no matter how big or small you are, the processes are very, very similar. In today's episode, we're going to be kicking off with blogging, the ins and outs of how to create a successful blog. We're going to talk about strategy, we're going to talk about how to write, what to write, and much, much more. Now, we're just about to meet today's guest, but before we do, please check out the sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Klaviyo, the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for email and SMS messaging. Whether you're launching your e-commerce business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo gives you the tools to get growing faster. That's why it's trusted by over 38,000 e-commerce brands. Build your contact lists and emails that pop and create marketing moments that build valuable customer relationships over any distance. Get started for free today. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Today, I'm chatting with content marketing expert Fynn Glover. Since 2011, Fynn has been helping businesses to tell their story. Most recently, that's led to him founding Matcha, a blog system developed specifically for D2C and e-commerce businesses. Hello, Fynn.
Great to be here with you, Chloe.
It's great to have you here too, and to be talking about a topic that I know blogging's something I've done for 15 plus years now, but I'm never sure if I've done it right or wrong. So I'm personally hoping to learn quite a bit from you today as well. But before we get into the blogging stuff, how did you get so into the world of content marketing?
Oh man, well, kind of by happenstance as it relates to blogging and e-commerce, but I, out of college, started a company called rootsrated.com, and it was a publishing business. So we created 10,000, 15,000 articles about the best places to go for hiking and trail running and climbing all over the United States. And that effort, which was 3 or 4 years in the making, basically taught us what it meant to be a publisher. And we learned what it meant to create content at relative scale, distribute that content, measure and analyze the performance of that content. And it taught me a couple of things. I think one, it taught me that my then advertisers would rather have me help them with content than they would put banners on my website. And I think I also learned that a lot of businesses just really struggled to set up publishing infrastructure in a way that would actually satisfy the demands of customers and perform for an e-commerce business. And so a few years ago, we started pivoting everything we were doing as a publisher towards being a combination of a software tool and a service arm for e-commerce businesses that needed help with content production and more specifically blogging.
Cool. So Matcha, the URL is getmatcha.com. So that's why I said that, people listening. So Matcha has literally come out of the problem that your advertisers were having. It's like, well, we could continue selling them ad space, so we could actually solve their problem. And there's probably a bigger business to be had out of that.
That's exactly what happened.
Nice. A big pivot, but one that, given you haven't pivoted back, I'm guessing it's going quite well. But look, let's talk about blogging then. Let's get into that, because clearly you have a lot of knowledge about blogging, and which is quite unusual. I mean, putting this part of the series together, it was like, right, I can find loads of people who can talk about blogging, but there's a real scarcity of people who can talk about blogging for e-commerce stores, blogging for retail. So Let's start kind of by flipping this on its head. Are there any e-commerce businesses who just shouldn't touch blogging with a barge pole? Or is it for everybody?
I don't think it's for everybody. For example, a drop shipping business may not be the best. Blogging may not be the best channel or tactic or strategy just because of how long-term its returns can be. Mm-hmm. And how much time it can take to actually produce returns. And if you're a drop shipping business and the margins are just razor thin, and you're selling a commoditized product and you're not trying to differentiate on brand, you're trying to differentiate on speed and agility and serving demand really rapidly, that's not the best time for blogging, in my opinion. The best time for blogging is when you're trying to build a brand that's going to last for a very long time, and you're needing to, one, answer questions about your product in ways that are really useful to the end customer and create a better customer experience. And the other is you're needing to make the story that you believe in and the passion behind the business really apparent to people through various types of aspirational content that serves a certain lifestyle.
So I suppose so long as you've got that long-term view and you've got that story, then, and you've got customers asking questions, then it doesn't matter what you're selling. There's blog content to be created. I
think that's right.
Nice. So that's all of you, apart from the drop shippers. The drop shippers, you can tune out if you want to.
I might be wrong about the drop shippers, but we've talked to drop shippers before, and they just generally don't view it as the right strategy for them because of kind of the way their businesses run. But for brands, it's such an essential aspect of building story.
Well, and I think the non-drop shipping side of things makes perfect sense to me, because that is a business model based on quick results and quick impact. It's, can we buy advertising traffic that converts at a price that's worth it for this product? We move fast, we shift, we adapt, and investing in long-term things like social and content and SEO to an extent is not part of that strategy.
Yeah.
It'd be like an e-commerce business deciding to I was going to say sponsor the Super Bowl, but obviously that's a terrible example. But for most e-commerce businesses, sponsoring the Super Bowl would not be a good move. Let's move on from that and get back into blogging whilst I fail to think of a good example. So what should we be blogging about as an e-commerce business? Is it about the product? Is it about the story? Is it all FAQs? How do we work out what to put out there?
I find categorization so helpful for just simplifying our lives, especially when we're trying to run businesses and life's chaotic. But I think very simply what we see from our customers who perform the best is there are two types of content, two types of blog articles. One is very much a utilitarian type of blog article, and often that takes the form of an article that serves to answer commonly asked questions from customers. And it can take different forms. You could see it being a simple FAQ piece, 500 words, just answering the question directly. But you could also see it taking on, maybe kind of more interesting manifestations where it's a product guide that helps a customer understand why one product that you sell is better if this is what you care about versus another product, depending on your technical use cases. So that's the bucket of utility. And the other bucket is really about aspiration. In D2C brand building, so much of what we're doing is we're trying to basically be a part of a customer's lifestyle, and not only be a part of it, but enable it and then inspire it. And so the ability to create blog articles that are aspirational and that help that lifestyle come to fruition are really important and powerful, and can be used in the context of e-commerce marketing across the full funnel. And so, one example would be if you are selling outdoor gear and you're not helping the customer understand how to participate in outdoor recreation, you're missing an opportunity to play a part of enabling that lifestyle.
And if you're selling coffee and you're not telling people what to do with the coffee, or you're selling hair care products and you're not telling them how to do their hair, then it's just a really obvious link that's completely disappeared, isn't it?
Yeah. I think if that's what you're doing, you're really kind of just focused on the product. And then the question becomes, in today's environment, can you win if all you do is talk about product?
Yeah, probably not. If you want that long-term growth.
We think probably not, unless you just have extreme product market fit and breakaway speed, and everything's perfect about what you've created.
And have you found this year, with all that's been going on, that retailers are doing more content or less content, and that consumers are responding more or less to it? Has there been a shift?
I think that every year there's more content, and we certainly saw a massive spike when in March and in April with the advent of COVID, because brands wanted to start talking to their customers about COVID, and so there's been a little bit of a downturn after COVID as things have started to not really return to normal, but sort of get back towards what it was before the initial spike. But the one thing I would maybe sort of try to flesh out is the volume of content that brands are producing is increasing exponentially every year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the volume of blog content is increasing exponentially each year. And what we have noticed in e-commerce marketing is that the long tail has not really gravitated towards or adopted blogging with what we would call great efficacy yet, whereas the best D2C brands have done blogging exceptionally. And there's a big gap in the middle between those brands that are blogging and those that are not. Everybody's producing content, but it's typically image, video. And our hypothesis as a business and our suggestion to brands is that blog content as an asset and the blog as a channel are very, very important. But they've been under adopted because they don't produce returns at the same speed that direct response ads do or Instagram images do.
And do you think, talking about the impact and the long-term impact of this content, is the blog content more about attracting in a new customer or convincing someone to buy? Does that make sense? Is it attracting people to the website, or is it making sure that when someone gets to the website, they go on to buy and they build their relationship with that retailer?
I think this is one of the things that makes blogging hard is the actual blog article as an asset, depending on what its purpose is, could serve many different purposes. And so where a lot of people make missteps is they're not that intentional or purposeful prior to creating the blog article itself. And so they don't really know what it's trying to do, but you could create an article that's purely designed as an inbound traffic asset. You could create an article that's purely designed to answer questions that a customer has. And you could create a blog article that's designed to drive repeat purchase or increase lifetime value in the context of an email campaign. There's so many different things that you could do with the blog article, but you often don't optimize what that asset is if you're not purposeful in the upfront creation.
Yeah, so if we're dealing with a frequently asked questions one that we want our customer services team to be able to link to, so there's a good experience for people who need that answer, worrying too much about optimizing it for SEO is going to be a waste of time.
Yeah.
But if we're creating those kind of big, important story pieces about the brand and about who we are that we want to get found in the search results, then yes, SEO is going to play a part, but not to overwhelm the story.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think it's an often overlooked facet, that need to know why you're creating this blog post. Because I'm sure you've come across this as well as businesses that go, yes, we do one blog a week.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your content strategy? Yes, we do one blog a week. Okay, great. Why? Because we should do blogs. It's like there's a whole strategy that goes into this. So I guess let's cover off the really simple questions, which kind of someone doing that is either heard bad answers to or so forth. So the question, which I'm sure there's people out there wanting the answer to, is how many blogs should we be creating a week, a month, a year?
So my personal opinion on this is to some extent, it does not matter.
Mm-hmm.
What matters is how intentional you are about the type of blogging you do, and that you have articulated a hypothesis, you've articulated a strategy, and then you execute against that strategy. That's way better than setting yourself up for, I've got to create this many articles a month. So the other way I'd answer that question is when we look at our customer base and we look at the data, what we see is that those companies who have most revenue influenced by blog consumption, people have read blog articles prior to purchase. those companies are on average publishing about 4 blog articles a month. So the takeaway is there's some level of publishing frequency that matters. Is 4 the magic number? Maybe, maybe not. Start with what are you trying to achieve, and then work yourself backward into a plan and evaluate the results really as you go and be iterative about it.
I like the fact you've given us a vague benchmark.
A vague benchmark.
But I will second your point, your mention on that. That isn't necessarily the magic number. It is definitely about the content first. But I think that stops people from going, the more blogs I do, the better we'll do, which is so not the case in this world. I like the fact it just keeps coming back to that strategy. So we will explore strategy in a moment or two. But before then, the other question, which I'm sure you get asked all the time, is how long should a blog be? How many words?
Again, it doesn't really matter too much. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're competing for relatively competitive keywords, you probably need to create assets that are, 700, 900, 1200 words. But the word count, that's just one part of ranking well for a competitive search term. But if you're trying to create an FAQ, you could write a 500 word blog article. If you're trying to write an aspirational piece, a recipe piece, it could be a 250 word article. It really, really depends, again, on what the asset is and what that asset's purpose is. And
is there, because all those numbers you've given as word counts, they're all sub 2000. So is there a point at which if our writing gets to like 10,000 words, should we be splitting that down into separate blog posts?
What we've seen is that, the 2,000 to 10,000 word really take the form of essay, almost journalism or analysis. I mean, that's where you see this other kind of faction of blogging becoming one of the most powerful influencers on the web is these influencer publishers who are creating blogs on Substack and creating their own newsletters, and they're writing deep analyses. Mm-hmm. But these are really publishers that are monetizing niche audiences through subscription. And I think that that's very different than e-commerce blogging, where, again, you're selling both a product and a story. You're not selling analytical journalism. And there's a really big difference between those two types of blog articles.
So keep it short, sweet, and to the point.
I think keep it relevant to your customer. And there are so few e-commerce brands whose customers are looking for 10,000 word market analysis. There are a lot of customers looking for inspiration in their life. Make my life better, make my life easier. And when I come to actually engage with you, make sure that my customer experience is really, really thoughtful.
I said we come back to strategy because we've been talking about you've got to do it in the right ways. How does someone who've not really blogged or certainly not blogged properly in the past, how do they start pulling together that strategy? Is there like a copy and paste one they can start with until they see some results, or is it more about getting back to the customer and working out what the right thing is for them?
I always think it comes back to the customer, and maybe a good jumping off point for creative inspiration is, do you know the most frequently questions your customers ask about your product, and then about the lifestyle that you think your product is a conduit to? We have a lot of experience in the outdoor apparel and recreation energy, as well as in the nutrition and fitness industry. And, in the outdoor recreation industry, customers are often asking, well, where might I go this weekend? Or, what's the best way to kind of like get into camping if I've never done it before? Those are kind of the aspirational questions that customers ask that brands can be that can create real relevance between a brand and a customer. The questions that are more technical are, why should I buy this stove versus this stove? And that's where you're trying to demonstrate your expertise around a product's technicality for a certain audience. And there are many different audiences for each brand often.
Excellent. So we start off with a little bit of research, not too hefty research, and then we can start putting the content out there. And I suppose as we go along, it's going to be a case of looking at what gets read and what has an impact, and then do more of it.
Yeah, and what's so interesting that, again, it's really hard to say here is the way to do blogging for every e-commerce brand. But there are kind of a couple core truths. If you know what the customer asks, you have a better chance of creating a great blog strategy. And if you don't know what the customer asks, then the question is, how do you figure that out? There are lots of ways to figure that out. You've got your intuition, you've got questions that your customers ask. If you don't have a product yet and you're trying to figure it out from scratch, and you're just trying to explore an open niche or market opportunity, you might start blogging about the things that you care about and see if there's any resonance. That might happen later in a business as well, because there are adjacent audience segments to your core audience that you might want to try to build inroads with. We have several customers who have a core business, a core audience, and then have used different blog articles about different subjects, different lifestyles to test those adjacent audiences. And they found real winners. And that's one of those really interesting use cases of blogging to me, where it can kind of seed different markets, test whether there's resonance, and then inform whether or not to further invest in that audience segment.
Can you, just for those who are going, adjacent audience, what on earth are you talking about? Could you explain that in a little bit more detail?
I'll try to explain it through a basic customer example.
Cool.
We have there's a company out of Seattle called Everly, and they sell a drink mix. So you pour the mix into water, and it's got all kinds of nutritional benefits. And their core audience, as they built their business, was really kind of middle-aged men and women who were looking to drink less soda and drink water that tasted a little bit better than regular water, but that didn't have so much sugar. And they started publishing blog articles about different types of dieting. And one of those types of dieting was the keto diet. And it turned out that people who cared about keto really liked the Everly product. That was an adjacent audience that they didn't actually know existed. And blog articles about keto happened to introduce them to an audience that they had never even thought about. And it's informed a lot of how they've invested in content and advertising ever since. And those are kind of those really interesting discovery moments that can be really efficiently executed, because to create a few blog articles about keto is very inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. But if it introduces you to a really lucrative audience segment, what incredible return.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, okay, cool. Nicely explained adjacent audiences there. So we've talked about the source blogs we should be writing. Who's the best person to write this content?
The person who's the best at writing on your team. And if you don't have somebody who's good at writing, you need to think hard about if you're not willing to produce quality copywriting, you should not blog. If you're not willing to make that investment, it's better to not produce something that is not quality. And so if you don't have anybody on your team that is a good writer, outsource it. And that's become very, very easy at this point with networks like Fiverr, and freelancers that you might know. The world is not short of great writers. And as a writer, we are all looking for work.
Especially this year.
Yeah. So find good writers and work with them to tell the story if you're not a writer yourself or don't have somebody on your team.
I like that. The person who can write is such good advice. It's quite often surprises me in businesses that the blogging gets given to the most junior marketing person just by default, whether their skills lie in Google ads or whether their skills lie in copywriting. It's just like, yeah, you're the newest person on the team. Here's the blog.
I really find it to be one of the most interesting things because, when I look at the internet for the last 20 years, I feel like blog writers, they have been the most influential people on the planet, arguably. I mean, they have shaped culture. They've shaped internet trends. They've shaped commerce trends. And it's really the ability to write good long-form content that has been so influential. And I think what happened was over the last 10 years, as direct-to-consumer e-commerce exploded, there was a generation of marketers who just didn't have to rely on really good long-form writing because advertising had become so cheap and the platforms changed the way they could interact with customers. And I think that that's changing. I think that as everyone advertises on those platforms and advertising becomes more expensive, it becomes harder to differentiate. And we see a shift back to differentiation really has a lot to do with your ability to tell a story with the written word.
So true. You mentioned the D2C companies there, and many of them are doing great things with blogging. Are there a couple of examples we could go and have a look at to see this in action?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of a customers that are customers and then brands that are not customers. But we recently created a resource to answer this question so that I don't.
That's cool. We'll take it. If you've got a resource that's easy for everyone to take a look at, let's do that.
eCommerceblogs.getmatcha.com is a growing database that we've started to build that highlights the best direct-to-consumer blogs across a number of different industries and categories. And some of them are our customers and many of them are not our customers. But I think it's a really great resource for those that want to look at best-in-class blogs across different brands.
Nice, that's brilliant, because now the listeners can go and potentially find a blog that's in their sector. So rather than us give just a couple of examples, there you go, guys. You've got loads of examples to go and get stuck into, and we'll add that link to the show notes for you. Okay, Fynn, we're going to pause now for a reminder of our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about the wider world of content marketing. It's safe to say that most of us have been doing more shopping online lately. And if you're an e-commerce brand, that means you might be seeing more first-time customers. But once they've made that first purchase, how do you keep them coming back? Well, that's what Klaviyo is for. Klaviyo is the ultimate email and SMS marketing platform for e-commerce brands. It gives you the tools to build your contact list, send memorable emails, automate key messages, and more. Way, way more. Whether you're launching a new business or taking your brand to the next level, Klaviyo can help you get growing faster. And it's free to get started. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan to create your free account. That's klaviyo.com/masterplan. Okay, Fynn, we've gone deep into blogging. Now you get to wow us with your insider knowledge about the whole of content marketing. So for the following questions, your answer can be anything to do with content marketing, which of course does include blogging. So Fynn, you ready for these?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's start with the content marketing newbie advice. If we've inspired someone to take their first step with content marketing, what do they need to know to give themselves the best chance of success?
Okay. Very simply, they need to know that they can fall into many potholes and they can waste lots of time and money if all they focus on is production without intentionality before the production or distribution strategy post-production. In other words, don't create content just to create content. If you do, you will have a lot of sunk costs and a lot of assets that are not producing value for your business. Be very intentional about what you're creating and have a plan for its distribution and how you'll measure its success.
Love it. Such obvious advice when you hear it, but something a lot of us are guilty of, just creating content and hoping it's going to work. Right, now you've started. Of course, you've got to keep optimizing. So what's your favorite way to improve content marketing performance?
So I think this really comes down to your marketing technology stack and how you measure the results of different marketing campaigns, tactics, and assets. Speaking very specifically about blogging, one question that we would always ask is, do you understand whether or not a blog article itself has influenced revenue? Where in the funnel has it influenced revenue? Is this a new customer or is this a long-time customer? And if you can't answer those questions, what about your technology stack needs to be assessed so that you can answer those questions?
Wow, that's got me wanting to know, and I'm going to now ask you. So, what sort of tech stack things are you meaning in there? Is this like a better Google Analytics installation, or is there something specific we should be using?
You could answer that question with Google Analytics, but probably not out of the box. And so the question is, do you have the internal resources to go set up Google Analytics so that you have that depth of insight? If you don't, there are apps out there. Matcha is one. There are other tools that you can use to have a much more intuitive and clear insight into the influence of a blog article. That doesn't encompass all content marketing. It doesn't encompass your Instagram images or your YouTube videos. And so depending on the channel, depending on the content asset itself, the medium, you have to make sure that you've got the tools in place to measure the asset's performance on the business.
Cool. Thank you for that. Okay, it's impossible to improve our marketing unless we are monitoring the performance. But the list of stuff we could monitor, as we've just touched on, can be overwhelming. So what for you is the number one content marketing KPI?
Probably to satisfy an answer. It depends. It depends on where you are in your business life cycle. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. You might be in a position where it's all about brand awareness. And so the KPI that matters the most is engagement or traffic. You might be in a phase of your business where it's all about reducing your reliance on paid. So the KPI is really about inbound organic traffic. There's no single answer to that question. It all comes back to what's going on with the business and what are you trying to achieve over the next 6 months to a year.
It comes back to what you were saying earlier about you need that strategy in place first, and that determines the KPI. You need to know the intent before you start doing anything, or inevitably you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah.
I like the consistency we're building here. Okay, finally, Fynn, it's crystal ball time. What's coming up in the next 6 to 12 months that we should be getting ready for in content marketing?
I think that most of the world would tell you that we need to prepare for a continuation of video-based commerce. And we see the power of platforms like TikTok and Snap and Instagram. I mean, everything seems to be video. We might be a little bit contrarian in that we think that that's not necessarily a fad, but it's not representative to us of something that's kind of silently happening underneath everything else, which is a demand for quality and curation and deeper explanations of the world and how to live life. And that's a little abstract, but that type of content that could produce those types of interactions with a customer is written content. And so our point of view is that over the next 6 months, year, next 5 years, we should all be prepared for written content that's longer form to become much more central to e-commerce success than it has been over the last 10 years.
I like that, the resurgence of written content. I think, video gets a lot of press, and I often think it's purely because it's what the algorithms on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, etc. are prioritizing. So the social platforms like video because we as humans like watching video, but it's not, you shouldn't fill your website full of video. You need to put easier to consume things, if that makes sense on there. Yeah, it's a good point, Fynn. I like it.
We could be wrong, but that's what we think.
Yeah, let's go with it. Look, we are nearly at the end of the show, and we really ought to let listeners know where they can find a bit more about Matcha and where they can find out more about Matcha too. So could you take us through that, please, Fynn?
Our website is getmatcha.com. We're also in the Shopify App Store. We think of ourselves as an all-in-one blogging platform for direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands, especially those on Shopify, as our best integrations are with Shopify at this point. But with the Matcha platform, you can create great blog articles. We have templates to accelerate your production, get your creative juices flowing, make it faster. We have tools that allow you to very easily drop in products and product collections and other e-commerce elements like forms and eventually social content, UGC content. You can publish it directly to your Shopify blog or your WordPress blog. We have intuitive analytics to help you understand whether or not somebody who's read a blog has actually purchased a product from you and how blog articles are influencing your funnel. And for those of you who don't have any content or need to supplement content, we have a large marketplace of content that we've aggregated from best-in-class publishers that are particularly useful in the context of social campaigns or email campaigns. It's a relatively large and broad platform, but we really are kind of designing it to be a tool that is very, very specifically focused on the challenges that e-commerce marketers face when they try to get into blogging and do it really well.
Nice. And we can find that at getmatcha.com. That's right, isn't it?
Getmatcha.com. And the name is it's a reference to the tea. I was not a matcha drinker myself, but I learned a lot about matcha, and it has very sustained energy lift. If you get into the tea, which is different than caffeine, which is very spiky. And so the symbolism for us is blogging has very sustained lift on companies if they invest in it correctly, and as does matcha for the drinker of the tea.
Nice. I have been wondering why you're named after green tea. Look, Fynn, thank you so much for coming on the Keep Optimizing podcast. I I hope you've made blogging a lot clearer for the audience out there, that it's not just about the words, it's about getting your plan in place and making that right. So thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing so much insight with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it, everyone. That is your to-do list. If you want to get started or take your blogging to the next level, I guess the first key thing is to remember that it's a long-term strategy, not a short-term solution. So this is something you're going to be investing in. Then to consider what the reason is for creating this. So that strategy, that intent piece that Fynn was really focused on there, that if you don't know why, to serve what purpose you're creating a piece of content, is it to build a greater relationship with your customers? Is it to attract traffic? Is it to help customers who are on your site who need answers? Is it to attract an adjacent audience? You really need to know that in order to then work out what content you need to create and to work out how you're going to report on and analyze the performance of that content. You can get links to everything we discussed, including that amazing resource of great e-commerce blogs. Well worth checking out if you're looking for ideas or you're not quite sure how to get started. We'll put links to that and everything else we discussed together with the full transcript of this episode, important notes, and much more at keepoptimizing.com. That's with an S, not a Z. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Keep Optimizing podcast. And as you do, tune in week after week. I really do appreciate it. It's very cool to see the numbers going up and to know I'm helping you all. Now, this month, there is no webinar. Because of Christmas and New Year diary issues, it was just proving impossible to pull it together. So apologies for that. But it does give you time to catch up on any of our past episodes that you've missed. Key ones that build on our conversation with Fynn today are Customer Personas with Lucy Bloomfield. That was episode 11. And one that we haven't released yet, but is coming up very soon with Shane Tilley from 99 Designs, who, yes, we are talking a bit about how to create great graphics, but we also get deep into how they rebuilt their whole content strategy. So quite a bit on blogging in that one too. That's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. Please do tell your fellow marketers about the show because I want to help as many marketers as possible to improve the performance of their marketing. Have a great week and make sure you listen to our next episode so I can help you to keep optimizing your marketing.
Access everything Keep Optimizing at keepoptimizing.com. That's with an S, not a Z.